Hey guys, how are you doing? Welcome back to yet another live show. It's so nice to see you all. I'm back here live from Los Angeles, your host, Lord Hellespont V, and I'm here with El Famoso Profesor.
El
Yes,
famoso.
the famous professor who is going to profess to us the entire breadth of his knowledge on the watch market today as we speak. As the gray market profiteers will tell you, it is simply going through a correction, but things have never been worse in the last couple of years for them than now. And it's just about to get even worse as things get colder in Europe and as the shortage of natural gas that is not going to arrive from Russia is going to make its effects felt in the center of Europe, as the inflation numbers will remain at an all time high, as unemployment numbers are rising. They have been counting on two things specifically, right? One, they are hoping for a Christmas miracle, right? That everyone is suddenly going to loosen up their purse strings simply because the holiday season is coming and they are all going to go on a shopping spree. And the second mantra I've been repeating for you was, oh, it's all this is just a correction and it's all going to come back once the Chinese market opens. And the horological gods have just opened the Chinese market, but it turns out the Chinese collectors are here to offload their watches, sell their watches, get rid of their hype pieces, and not get more of them. So let's dive right in to this piece that we have seen in Financial Times just a few days ago. Luxury watch prices have, as wealthy Chinese sell collections to stay afloat. And I just want to read a short, I just want to share a short snapshot from it, just so we are on the same page. They're talking about the Hainan district in China, which is kind of set up by their government as a duty-free paradise. So the Chinese customer, the Chinese consumer, can benefit from a market of luxury goods when channels for travel have been closed to the usual locations such as London, Rome, and Paris. And here's what our reporter Sun Yu is writing from Beijing. Pawn shops and other luxury goods resellers said there had been a big rise in customers led by cash strapped business owners struggling to pay down debt and keep their operations afloat. So the Chinese customers are, in fact, going back to the watch shops, but not to buy more watches. They are selling. The boom time is over, says Jimmy Wang, a seller of secondhand luxury watches in the eastern city of Nanjing. We're entering a correction period that could last for a long time. Wang said he bought 6 Patek Philippe and 29 Rolex Submariner watches from distressed owners in July, compared with just 5 Rolex Submariners in the first quarter of this year. 5 Submariners sold to this gray market reseller in the first quarter of the year. 29 sold to him in the month of July. You make of that what you will. What say you, Professor?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you, and it's always great to see you. We don't see enough of you, Lord, and because you have a lot of good things to say. Um,
Thank you.
I think what is happening is exactly what you just said, and what the article talked about. Um, the Chinese market, to begin with, is the largest market for luxury watches. It is the
Mm.
largest market for most of the top brands. So for a long time now, we have been talking about, well, the correction in Europe, the US, the confluence of events, stock markets going down in the West, in the US and Europe. Um, um, ah, Thank you. Bezels, or Bezels.
Bezel, uh, platinum, just like platinum. Yes, that's the correct
Platinum.
pronunciation. Thank you. And I like to watch us here too. So thank you for being here, both of you. Um, yes, El Professor. Sorry, it's China is the biggest market, of course, for many of these luxury brands, especially when it comes to the horological giants.
Yeah, exactly. And for some time now, since the correction begun, we have been told that, look, it's a correction. U.S. stock markets have gone down. It's a bit of a slowdown. There is this inflation thing going on. Plus, the crypto world, cryptocurrencies have gone down. But it's a correction. It's, 20%. But now the biggest market of all, China, is telling us that they're not buying watches, they're selling watches. And if they're selling watches, it means that it's not just about Russia that has been cut off, and the allocation of the Russians will go towards the US and the UK. This is what we have been told. It's now also China, and China is the biggest of all. And if China is going down and demand is falling, and as the article said, 29 Rolex Submariners being bought by this guy versus five in the first quarter, right? I mean, it's quite telling that there is something going on in China, which is huge. And if the Chinese do not buy watches, then all the production will have to go somewhere. Obviously, they're not going to stop the watchmakers from producing watches, so it has to go somewhere. And secondly, what happens to the gray market? The gray market has been hoarding watches and selectively selling them and propping up prices. So, what will happen to the gray market is equally important, and what happens to this huge supply of watches. So, inevitably, what will happen is that when you have a lot of supply and demand falling, this is simple economics, prices tend to fall very quickly. And I think this is what is happening. Now, the next thing that the gray marketeers are telling people is that, well, now we're in the summer holiday season. Come September, as you said, Christmas is coming. September, usually things pick up. Well, in September, as you said, and let me just add to what you said, Lord, you will have first of all, we have a crisis of inflation. We have a cost of living crisis. Things are going up all the time. Okay, maybe they stabilized a little bit in the month of June in the US, but in the UK, interest rates are rising. They had a fabulous, increase, if I can call it as such, of the highest increase in interest rates in the 27-year history of the Bank of England. The Bank of England announced that they will have most likely inflation going around 13%. They have a gas crisis. The Europeans, I'm not sure what they're going to be heating themselves. Probably they'll have to chop wood. The Germans have not more than 3 months reserves of natural gas for them to heat their homes. And, you know, in Germany, as you know, winter is coming fast. So usually beginning of September is when you have, you know, kind of the beginnings of fall and people start using heating, right? Because temperatures fall very quickly in Germany. And they're not like you guys in California. So, you know, so if you have this, all these things happening, I don't know how people are going to end up buying watches. And, you know, on top of it, um, you have this weird announcement, which is just falling on deaf ears, by Watches of Switzerland. They're expanding their, you know,
Oh
flagship
yes, we
store.
we are going to talk about that next, but I wanted to zoom in, or I wanted to highlight what you said as part of your last portion of your remarks, because the focal point being the Chinese market for many of these watch companies, many of these horological companies. Um, and the fact that that market is in fact unloading or offloading the watches rather than buying more of them in the secondary market means simply, like you said, production levels now finally picking up after the pandemic, that there will be more watches because the production numbers are remaining either the same or higher for certain brands than they were in 2019. And there will be simply more examples, more units of any given model in the secondary market, right? Whether we are talking about pre-owned watches or new watches, which means a lot of these hype watches, if they have simply taken so far 20-30% of a hit, which gray marketeers continue calling a correction, but I think Jimmy Wang actually came with an even better term. We're entering a correction period that could last for a long time. That's a I like that definition of correction better. What do we call a correction that lasts for a long time? For example, a decade. What would that be exactly? Maybe it starts with an R. I don't know. You are the economist, so what do I know? Um, but the point is, they were depending on the opening of the Chinese market so that a lot of the Chinese luxury consumers would snap up all these units, all these watches they have been saving, they have been hiding, they have been hoarding in their vaults. But the Chinese customer, who is in fact coming back to the luxury market, is coming back to offload, is coming back to sell watches. Um, so that was their last gasp. That was their last sigh. That was their last hope. Now they really have to hang on to that Christmas miracle because there's nothing else left. The Chinese market has left them and is going to hang them to dry. Bye bye, gray marketeers. It was nice having you for a couple of years. Now you have to become YouTubers like the rest of us.
Yeah, very well said. And you know, I wanna pick up on what you said just now. Is that the you know we are. Let me use the example of Japan of the early 1990s. So the Japanese in the 1990s, the stock market fell. Um, it did a record high, 40,000. The index reached 40,000 or something like that, and then it kept on correcting and falling and correcting, and it took about just recently for it to recover above that level. So it took 30 years for it to recover. I'm not saying that it's going to take 30 years for things to recover here, but in economics, there is a principle or a theorem. We call it the economics of thrift, which means that you and I, let's say, want to buy a Rolex, and we're waiting for prices to correct. Okay, and we say,
Mhm.
okay, we're going to go out in the market and buy one, but suddenly we're seeing all these things happening. Watches correcting, there is a recession, concerns, prices are beginning to fall. And what do? We say, okay, well, Lord, are you going to pull the trigger? You say, oh, no, I'm going to wait. And as a society, we all start to wait until it corrects, and it corrects further. And we keep on waiting as prices are falling. We keep on waiting and waiting. And actually, we don't buy anything. And just by waiting, because we have such big numbers that are waiting on the sidelines, prices keep on falling. And we've seen this in Japan for a generation or two. People were not really consuming much. They were buying the necessities, but not buying the luxury. They were not buying the massive things that Japanese tend to buy. It's a consumer-based society as well.
Can
And so
I?
we could be, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just one sentence to interject there, since you brought up the example of Japan, right? Japan's so-called correction period that took off, or that began in 1991, is now remembered as the lost decades. So it basically lasted, the correction period for the Japanese economy lasted for about 20 years. Um, so, I mean, they can keep calling it correction, but things are looking much more severe. It's a very bleak picture for the economy at large, and certainly for the secondary market of watches too.
Yeah, I think this is, the point to be made here is that first you don't know when things will bottom out. Secondly, there is this thing going on in the US. We don't really know.
Did the professor freeze again? Yes, we are back, as you have seen.
Sorry, we're
No
back.
worries.
Sorry, the connection is not great, where I
Is
am.
is this the old country or old new country? Where are we?
No, I'm in the antiquities country, the
Okay.
country with antiquities, and so their internet is antiquated as the country I'm in. They haven't discovered 5G. They're getting there. We're still 3.5G. But let me say this. Let me use the example of the U.S. guys. We're not sure. U.S. stock markets, especially technology, have picked up over the last few weeks, and the Nasdaq has rallied by about 20%. So things are beginning to look a little bit okay, right? Oh, people are saying. So I'll tell you one report came out from J.P. Morgan saying, okay, we're going into this. We have bottomed out, and we're going to start seeing a rally in U.S. stocks. Morgan Stanley came out with another report and said, no, this is not a real rally. This is a bear rally, meaning that we're in a bear market. Things are going down, but they tend to go up for just a little bit, but the trend is downwards. So between these two, titans, we need to figure out where we are. So if you guys think that from here on things are going to recover, then things could recover. And if stock markets recover, cryptos tend to also follow what US stocks do. And Bitcoin is back to 23,000 or so dollars, and the rest of the crypto world is kind of uh, recovering from the bottom. But we're not sure if this is a real recovery or it's a fake one, and things will take a dive from here on. And if they do take a dive, for sure, watches are not going to be sitting at a correction point of 20%. You know, there will be a lot of supply, and there'll be limited demand because people will be running for their lives. paying off bills. Interest rates are rising, so you can't just go to a bank and get a consumer debt. There is no more free money. There is no money because of COVID. There is no money to support a business anymore. There is no free money, cheap money going around, to buy watches and to buy cars and all these consumer goods. Governments will be worried about, the cost of living crisis, the energy crisis, and what happens to our recovery mode, jobs. Again, the job market is not clear in the US. Last job report, it showed that, people are still in jobs, they're employed, and that's probably the only secure thing happening in the US economy, that the market is still strong. The employment market is strong. If we lose that, you can see those watch prices falling even further. I mean, I'm not going to be surprised if you walk into your AD in the coming months and he starts taking the liberty to give you price discounts on, precious metal watches and two-tone watches, and then, the appearance of the steel professional watch for some of these pieces.
I mean that's already started happening. One of our regular contributors, one of our um, frequent panelists here, Aussie expat, just got an with a polar dial a couple of months ago. I have been offered from a very otherwise snooty AD in the Southern California area. First, a two-tone Sea Dweller, and then the SD43 in stainless steel in quick succession. Um, I know that, again, another person in the community from another AD that they had a relationship with from their previous residence in yet another city were randomly offered an Explorer in 36 millimeter, the classic. Um, so certain watches that are not as hyped up, even in stainless steel, are becoming available to the enthusiast, to the collector, because all these imaginary or real wait lists that authorized had were largely populated by filthy flippers, by people who bought those watches, put it on a card, turned around and sold it to a gray market seller for a quick profit. But since those quick profits have disappeared, since a lot of gray marketeers are simply sitting on their own stock and are not buying watches or not buying watches at that particular price point anymore, that has eroded. So nowadays, though, one observation that I have made and others have also pointed out, we still get a lot of watches, of course, and a lot of times with cards that date them just to last month or something, right? So, which confirms again that there is an organic connection, there's a kind of umbilical cord between a lot of the authorized dealers globally and the gray market sellers in various parts of the globe, including the US, the UK, Hong Kong, the Middle East, and beyond. So those are interesting developments, but I wouldn't be surprised um, that you would see in 2 months when you go to the authorized dealer, maybe they will remove that exhibition only tag and put a price tag instead. And they don't have to replace most of the watches anyways, because they're actually functional. They're not dummies. They work.
Yeah, I think we're in, for those who are collectors, they will be able to collect and buy more, no doubt. I think this winter will be heaven for the collectors. if we have money left. Um, and I think you're very right. I think that it's just going to be very difficult for the flippers, if not already, and for these gray marketeers who appear as YouTubers now, just because the demand is collapsing very quickly and it's not recovering unless there is a miracle, guys. And for some reason, everything goes up now. Crypto, stock markets, energy crisis disappears, inflation disappears, slowdown disappears, and things just and the Chinese recover. Everything looks great. I mean, the Chinese economy is going into a very difficult period because there is a real estate crisis. The government doesn't know what to do with all these people, millions and millions of people who have bought into real estate ventures, off-plan real estate, and the banks are exposed, and they're not meeting their monthly real estate payments, so they're forfeiting on these payments. And the banks are left with a lot of, unpaid debt on real estate. Property markets are collapsing in China. On top of it, the economy is slowing down. Something that you said very correctly, China is coming back into the supply game. So the supply crunches we had during COVID and immediately after COVID is coming to an end, right? So a lot of these watchmakers are now being well supplied,
Mhm.
um, and there is no supply issue. Yes, there are some glitches, but recently Apple announced its results, and a lot of analysts are beginning to say that Apple is showing signs of a slowdown. So if Apple is showing signs of a slowdown, obviously it's a global product and it tells you that there is something going on in the global economy. And watches are not going to be bought just because they're luxury watches. And people, the myth that I often hear is that no, luxury watches are insulated from what's going on.
Yeah.
Because yeah,
Can
go
I
ahead.
interject on that point specifically of supply that you have raised, and what is actually going on in the Chinese market, in the Chinese secondhand luxury goods market? And this is the last word of that Financial Times article. Sean Rain at consultancy China Market Research said that the sudden rise in supply and resulting price drops, again, Economics 101, of secondhand luxury goods were evidence of very weak consumer confidence. It's probably the weakest I've seen in my 25 years in China, right? When people are defaulting on their payments, on their housing payments, when the people are forced to sell the luxury goods they have been hoarding to keep their businesses afloat, obviously the luxury watch market is going to be affected as well. We're talking about a lack of confidence. It's going to affect the very way we live. It's going to affect our lifestyles. It is obviously going to affect everything. I have to pay basically 50% more for the stupid jar of peanut butter. Um, I mean, come on. That's the staple of my breakfast table. It's how are things not going to be affected by the kind of crisis that we are facing? Um,
Has
it's
your jar gone up 50%, Lord?
basically since the beginning of the pandemic. A jar of peanut butter basically went from $2 and a change to almost $4 and more.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife tells me because I don't do the grocery shopping, but when I follow her, I mean, she tells me that things have gone up quite a bit. I see it, of course, in the cost of living numbers and so forth.
This is a good one that I think the professor might be familiar with these brands as well. Skippy, you
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
from your American days? From Skippy to Skimpy.
No,
From
absolutely. You know, and people look, I mean, there will always be an enthusiast that wants to buy the watch. And I think what we're seeing is what we call the tail effects of all this. You know, there's always going to be now a consumer who buys the coveted watch that he couldn't buy a year or 2 years ago, you know, because he still has it stuck in his memory that, you know, he needs to get it, and he's on that, you know, assumed list, and he gets the phone call, and they say, "We just have this watch for you, my friend. This watch has been waiting for you. It just came in." Of course, there are 50 other people who said no to it, but, you know, that guy says, "Oh my God, this is it." And then he goes and buys it, fine. And then, you know, 3 months later, he says, "Oh my God, what's going on? There's a storm." And I just went and bought the watch, right? Um, and of course, the only advice we can give, Lord, is that, you know, just forget the gray market, buy it at retail, because you will get it at retail. I mean, I think not the most coveted of all, you know, the Daytonas will not be widely available, but they'll be more widely available than these weird uh, lists that claim that you need to be waiting for 10 years for a watch. I mean, who waits for 10 years for a watch? Get a life and move on. You know, buy a Casio. I'm wearing a Casio G-Shock.
Oh yeah, the not your famous GMT master today.
Yeah, it's a
Oh,
G-Shock. Yeah,
nice.
uh,
Very
it's
cool.
nice. $120.
Very, very cool. I'm wearing actually my old late 70s date just on a leather band. Um, right here.
Oh, beautiful.
I'm trying to bond with it again. It's been a while since I last wore it. Um, it has a beautiful silver linen dial, kind of a great monochromatic watch when you put it on the Jubilee bracelet. Um, very nice for the everyday, whatever it is that you're wearing. It suits basically every style, every occasion. For me, the vintage 36 millimeter sizing is just perfect. It's peach perfect. Um, but yeah, on that note, speaking of retailers and authorized dealers, let's use Mr. Foss's question to segue into our next topic, which is this new expansive and extravagant Rolex boutique that our favorite authorized dealer is going to open in London. But Mr. Foss says before that, when can we buy a simple Oyster Perpetual for the retail price at an AD? What do you think,
I
Professor?
I think soon. I think that you know, unless they decide to take it offline and just cancel the entire line of Oyster Perpetuals.
Right.
Um,
Of course, the professor is referring to the fact that some of the colors in the Oyster Perpetual line at the 36 and 41 were simply discontinued after less than a couple of years, right? The what do they call it? The saffron yellow and the turquoise blue simply went away from Oyster
yeah, the yellow,
41.
the red, and Tiffany, the
Right.
Tiffany blue. They
Turquoise.
just turquoise. Yes, they took it out. Actually, I saw it in somebody's wrist 2 weeks
You did.
ago. Lord,
The real thing, the real deal.
it was a 41 millimeter um, turquoise. That's I like that term because everybody says Tiffany, and we're giving them too much free advertisement. These people.
That's true.
Um,
Not that they need it, but yeah.
not that they need it. I mean, of course, who care? They won't care if we say it or not, you know. But I saw it on this lady's wrist, older lady, but she happened to work for Rolex. And I asked her, I said, "Oh, you're wearing this watch? You must be very lucky." She said, "I got the last unit produced by the company."
Possible. I mean, it's
It was the last of the
again,
last, and she was wearing it, and it was a gift from the company. She's working at the company now for 40 years. So I said, you know, please take care of it because if you walk
yeah.
around that outside of Geneva, they'll chop off your wrist.
Oh, we're back to that again. The so I mean, my short answer to this is, of course, certain colors are discontinued, and of course, Rolex seems to be shuffling around its cards in that Oyster Perpetual deck pretty frequently and in unexpected ways. But I think the more um, regular colors like the silver um, should be available quite soon. I think before the end of the year, if you're waiting to hear from an AD, Mr. Foss, I'm sure you can hear something before the end of the year. If you want to um, basically wait it out, you can approach them again towards the end of the year and see if they can allocate you something either by the end of the year or maybe first quarter of next year. I think, black, silver, a lot of these colors you should be able to get either in 36 or 41, whichever one is your preference. I see people in the community getting the silver one quite frequently, in fact, already in the last few months. And yes, Mr. Foss is reminding us that the 39 millimeter only lasted for a short blip there as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. Absolutely right, Lloyd. You will see them. The silver one is the less demanded one from the three remaining. I'm referring to the 41 millimeter because I went through the same exercise.
Mhm.
And the silver is the most available, together with the black and silver. But silver is easier, they said. And then there is the. Sorry about the noise here, but there's some. Um,
No worries.
the so there is the silver, and then the black, and then there is the blue. So the most out of the three in demand is the blue, the most difficult. But the couple of authorized dealers I spoke to, they said to me that the silver you can get fairly easier. So by the end of the
Mm,
year, if you ask now, you'll probably get it, the silver
mm.
and the black, and then a few months of waiting time, you'll get the blue. If this is what you
If
want.
if I'm if I'm not mistaken, they have also introduced the new green as an option as well. Although I'm sure that has the largest demand placed on
Yeah,
it.
the
So
green.
I think
Yeah,
in
I took the.
41 they have four options now: silver, black, blue, and green, mint green, whatever they call it. That new shade of green they introduced.
Yeah, the green is the most sought after within the line of OPs, the four colors that they produce now. The green one was really in high demand. But if you look at, for instance, the collapse of the gray market in the green, it used to sell at the same price as the yellow and the coral red, and now the green you can get it for. It was usually four times, about 4 to 4.5 times retail. Now you can get it for two times retail, so it
Mm.
sells in the gray market for around 10,000 and going down. So
Okay,
eventually, the
my
green.
my My bad, by the way. No, that's the green they have always had in the Oyster Perpetual. It's I'm mixing things up. That other shade of green was introduced for Datejust and Day Date. Yeah, my bad, my bad. But yes, you're right. Please continue, Professor.
Yeah, and so I think the green is also there. They will tell you the green is the most sought after from the OP line. You have to wait, for the arrival of Christ or prophet, whatever, and then you get the green. I mean, that nonsense kind of talk, but the market is going to be supplied with the green eventually.
Mm. Yeah, I think in the current market, even the more desirable blue and green might be within reach somehow. But I see people being allocated the silver and the black quite frequently, actually. So, though, if you're looking for one of those, Mr. Foss, I think you should be able to get them quite soon, and the rest probably by the end of the year, maybe first quarter. But let's
And
look
we
at
don't
this.
know, yeah, exactly. We don't know how the market will really pick up in terms of the supply because we just think that these months will be the waiting time. It could be that you get supplied. What I know is that ADs, other than these gimmicky ones like Watches of Switzerland, but the regional ADs, are getting supplied large quantities of watches. Watches of Switzerland is hoarding watches. They're not selling
Yes,
you
speaking
watches.
speaking of which, so there's this new piece that just dropped on my desk, that they are in fact opening a new boutique, an eightfold expansion to meet booming demand in London. What is going on? What do you think is the purpose behind this? Because you have said a number of times to me, behind the scenes, but also here, on this channel, that they are engaged in certain questionable business practices. And you said right now, I'm quoting verbatim, that they are hoarding watches, keeping them in their vaults and waiting for the right moment to sell them. Is that true?
Well, there is obviously something going on because if for several months now, if you go and register for a watch, a professional watch, they will tell you you cannot register. We don't take new registrations anymore. So
Mhm.
they can register you for two-tone pieces and for precious metals, full gold, platinum, platinum, and all that. But if you go in and you say, "Hi, I am John Smith, and I want to buy a no date sub," they will tell you, "Sorry, we cannot put you down for that watch." They use this terminology, which is, neither confirm nor deny all of that, but they will not take your name down. But they'll sell you the two-tone watch, right? And they'll say, okay, you can register for that. So something is going on because they're getting a lot of watches. I mean, what they're telling you, if you push them a little bit, is that we have huge demand and we need to accommodate for the existing people on the list, and then we'll accommodate everybody else. But obviously, I think they're hoarding watches, and they're keeping them. Whatever strategy is going on, I don't know. But the whole thing last year, and I'll tell you why this is rigged. The whole thing last year and the year before, that Watches of Switzerland, because they are actually an oligopoly in the UK, because Watches of Switzerland has three brand names. There is Watches of Switzerland, there is Goldsmiths, and there is Mapin and Webb, right? And these guys really command the market in the UK, right?
Mhm.
um, for Rolex and also for other brands as well. But for Rolex, they are the ones that really control the market. And for now, a couple of years, right? They have been telling you if you go and register your name, they'll tell you, "Oh, okay, we need to have a history with you." We don't know who you are. Mr. Lord, you're a good, decent guy. I'm sorry. We need to get to know you. So why don't you buy this garbage? Buy this Dayjust. Do you really want this? No, I don't want this, Mrs. Helen. I want to buy a Rolex Submariner, or I want to buy, Explorer, 2, Panda or Black. This is very much sought after watch. We don't know you. You need to have a watch history, Mr. Lord. So why don't you buy this garbage watch? Okay, and then slowly we build a history with you. They rigged the system, so they had you buy, and I know thousands of people. I know hundreds of people that have gone through this, because I talked to a lot of people, and they went through this history. So they went and bought the first garbage watch that led them to buy the second watch. And then slowly they got, the professional steel piece. One.
Mm,
Suddenly they change the rules now and they say, forget all this. You're not allowed to get any more professional pieces because we have huge demand and you can only buy 3 professional pieces a year, right? Now, by the way, they included in that list the Oyster Perpetual. Yeah, suddenly, the Oyster Perpetual is a professional piece. It's the junk of Rolex. It's the entry watch, but it's a professional piece suddenly. So you're not allowed to buy. So all these guys who bought the junk suddenly are being told you cannot buy any of these watches because either you bought them or we cannot get them for you, right? You bought the two-tone Rolex Sea Dweller in
mhm,
anticipation that you'll get the coveted watch, right? Now you're being told, forget it. We have too much demand. But obviously, they're getting huge amounts of watches, throughout the summer and before that, because I know from my regional ladies, they're getting 30, 40 watches a month. They're getting in the watches now. There is no issue with supply. So obviously, they're hoarding these watches for some reason, you know. So I think the system is rigged, and it's not helping the collector, and it's not helping people who went through the rabbit hole of buying all these really unwanted watches to build a watch history, and suddenly the system changes the rules. Watches of Switzerland changes the rules and says, no, sorry, you guys are off limits. We cannot give you any more watches because now we need to cater for this new group. By the way, Rolex Geneva, Rolex Geneva, and this is, I know it quite well, Lord, does not condone and support the practice of selling junk and garbage before you get into the professional piece. Rolex Geneva does not say to authorized dealers, go off and build a watch history. No, it does
yeah.
not say. If you want to
Can I,
register for a Daytona, you have the right to register for a Daytona. Or you might never
bef-
get it, but
before we loop back to that, Professor, can I ask a very simple question? Because two things don't necessarily reconcile in an inquiring mind. Because on the one hand, uh, we know this for a fact about many authorized dealers, and I think Watches of Switzerland is just doing it in a larger scale, that they are hoarding a lot of these desirable Rolex models in their vaults. Yet they have just committed to an eightfold expansion uh, in London for their flagship store. Why open such a gigantic, ginormous store if you are going to, if you're not going to decorate it with watches to sell? Do you really need all that space if your primary strategy is to move your stock through the back door, through backroom deals? Why do you need this boutique? Right? Why does Watches of Switzerland need this gigantic Rolex boutique in London?
because I think there are many reasons. One is that they're looking at the long picture, the long kind of view of the market, and they want to portray that things are going to be fine over the long term. Two, its commitment to the brand, to Rolex, that look, maybe there is a bit of a slowdown, but we believe in you. And, London is a flagship for us and for you, and we're going to commit by building this. We're going to show you how big we are. And of course, the stock price of Watches of Switzerland yesterday rallied by 7%. Obviously, those who bought the stock don't understand simple economics. I mean, we are in a recession, in a global recession, but we're talking about, flagship stores. And I think thirdly, I think the strategy of hoarding professional pieces is because, they're betting on the market, the consumer who hasn't bought into the myth, into the watch. And so they say, okay, let me get my hands on something. So what do I get now? I get a two-tone or a precious metal one. So let me buy this two-tone watch. Because in a recession, they'll be able to offload easier the steel
Mhm.
pieces with maybe a little bit of a premium than it is to go for the two-tone because it's selling 50% more. And then the all gold pieces are selling, three times that.
Here's
So
a
that
here's a very very intelligent and specific question, which I think you should be able to answer at Professor. Jake Brooks says, "Do you think they get allocation in proportion to floor space? Does that affect their allocations as an authorized dealer directly?"
uh, for the floor space, no, because there are others who get more in terms of floor space. No, allocation is based on numbers. If you sell, and especially if you sell the heavy pieces, the precious metals and the two tones more than others, you get more allocation. Doesn't have to do with floor space. It has to do with just sheer numbers. No, I think it's the commitment because Watches of Switzerland has been selling Rolex for, how many years now? 80 years? It's really a commitment that they're showing. And also London, remember, in the summer, you're not going to see the blip. You're not going to see, the instances of a slowdown because every Arab sheikh that has oil is visiting London buying watches, right? If we guys are suffering, these guys are not suffering because oil is, until recently, oil was at $120 a barrel and they're benefiting from that. So London is basically, they're saying to the world and Rolex, look, we're with you for the long haul. We're going to build a huge place and we're here putting the money in the investment. We love you guys. And if you heard bad things about us, hoarding watches, selling watches from, the back way and all of that, it's okay. Here's our commitment. We're putting the second largest shop in the world, and here we are. And Rolex will say, "Oh, great, we love you," and the CEO will fly in to cut the ribbon, and they'll all be happy and joyful.
Um, by the way, my friend, I heart Maldives. I love Maldives. Just sent us another article in Financial Times um, that takes a more macro look on the economic impact of the coronavirus on Chinese economy, which sums up the situation in its headline quite well, I think. Chinese economy in desperate situation. America's extreme heat belt, plight of UK small businesses, semiconductor politics. This is kind of a digest version of a lot of the recent developments. China today cut a key interest rate as new data confirmed the slowdown in the world's second biggest economy. The People's Bank of China unexpectedly reduced the medium term lending rate through which it provides 1 year loans to the banking system by 10 basis points to 2.75%, the first reduction since January, highlighting anxiety in Beijing over shrinking consumer demand. We had just ended the other article on the note of historic low levels of consumer confidence. And this is yet another instance where we see the reflection of that lack of confidence, lack of belief in the larger state of the economy. Chinese stocks fell on the disappointing data, setting them on a different path from rising equity markets in other major economies, such as in the US, and denting confidence in the investors' global outlook. Uh, Inflation, while lower than in other major economies, remains at its highest level in 2 years. Lockdowns and strict quarantine regulations, however, remain the main drivers of the new pessimism. To take just one recent example, Hong Kong's international schools are struggling to hire teachers ahead of the new academic year. China is definitely in a very desperate situation, said Xingdong Chen, an economist at BNP Paribas. The problem now is no effective demand. If you don't allow people to come out and consume, there is no demand. Thank you for sharing this piece with us. I love Maldives and we love you. Thank you for your contribution as well. Ah, yeah, so Professor, we have actually decided to limit today's discussion to an hour, but I know you have much to say, so I will still give you the last word, and if you want to bring up maybe one or two more things, I'm here. I have some time to kill. We can run it for a little longer than an hour.
Yeah, I completely agree. Uh, Look, we also as economists do not know where all of this is going. Uh, in the sense that, are we bottoming out and we're recovering, or we're at the beginning of this long protracted recession slowdown? We don't know. But what do we do? We do know is that China is not doing very well. The US is having serious hiccups. Wealth has been distorted and destroyed in the US. You look at the stock markets, and individual stocks have gone down in the technology space from 20 to 40, 50%, some of them even more. Housing prices are beginning now to fall. We're not, in a similar situation as '08, '09 during the great financial crisis where we had subprime and all that. But we do feel that things are slowing down. Yeah? So that I think is important. And on top of it, we have the crisis of energy. We have the consumer cost of living crisis. And we haven't yet experienced a slowdown in the job market. So all these things have to impact luxury items, whether it is handbags or pens or I don't know what else people buy. People, even unless you are one of those, multi isolated billionaires living in some odd Swiss village, you're sitting in Gstad, and you're isolated from the rest of the world. You don't really read anything. Um, you're not going to go, if you're a normal person like myself and yourself, you will think twice or three times if you buy a luxury watch. And especially if you pay, a premium, you have to be mad to be paying a premium now. You just have to be patient. I think you have been saying that for some time. Just wait,
Yeah.
guys. Wait. There was, I think, a gentleman who was taking your advice about the Lange, right? And he was asking you whether he should buy it now, and you told him wait for 5 months. And I think this is wise advice. Unless you have to go and wear the watch for an event, which I don't know why a person should do that,
Uh,
because you buy a watch for yourself. Yeah.
Sorry to interject here as a Coys, yes. As a Spurs fan here, I have to admit, Absolute Bore says biggest fall in stock value across the globe has been Tanguy and Dombele. What a dud. I have to agree with you. He has been a great disappointment, but thankfully, with Antonio Conte at the helm, the Spurs are really not missing Ndombele in any way. And I had a lot of fun watching that particular game, Chelsea against Spurs, and that the little spat and the back and forth that the two managers had on the sidelines between Thomas Tuchel and Antonio Conte. It was some great fun. I love those sorts of rivalries that kind of spill over out from the field in ideally non-violent ways, of course, but in ways where you can certainly sense the passion and commitment that these footballing minds have for the teams that employ them. To me, in the age of industrial football, it's always nice to see, um, where you have coaches, where you have managers who are so emotionally and passionately invested in their clubs. Um, so with that being said, everyone again to hold on tight to the seats of your pants. There's no reason to rush into any decisions, especially on the secondary market, especially if you are contemplating paying a premium. Um, of course, this is also the time where you have a lot of attractive deals popping up in the secondary market, right? I've taken advantage of one recently myself, right? I know we won't be going back to the days where you could get for 3.5 K a good example of a type 20. So when I found one on the full stainless steel bracelet for $4,000, I snapped it. But it wasn't a decision that I made lightly, and I knew that I wasn't paying premium. I knew that even in the deepest of falls, I wouldn't be losing my shirt on it if I ever had to get rid of it. And thank the Lord that I have not faced a situation like that yet, and hopefully not anytime soon. But yes, it's you will sometimes find these tempting deals, but you always have to calculate risk and reward, right? What am I going to be paying for this watch? Is it on a downward trend? Am I just trying to appease my own desire and aspiration that gets ahead of me, that makes me part with my money too easily, easier than I should? Can I save a little bit more for what are perhaps more essential expenses by just waiting a few more months? And guys, again, we have a real economist here from his day to talk to us, to share with us his knowledge. Of course, he's not a seer. Of course, he is just making forecasts. He's not a diviner, right? He's not talking with absolute certainty. But it seems like that this downward trend will continue for some time to come. So chances are any good deal that you see now, you will see even better deals by the end of the year, even better deals by the first quarter of 2023, simply because the supply is going to increase, right? There are going to be more examples of that watch, of that particular model, whether we are talking about vintage or contemporary. And thus, the prices are going to continue on that downward turn, even if they might not dip radically and significantly, just as they won't really be picking up radically and significantly anytime soon in the next few months. So it's much, much better to be patient, to be studious, to be responsible. Do your research. I'm here to help you. You know, you can always email me directly at lordhellespontv@gmail.com. I'm always at your service if you want any advice on curating your collection. If you are in need of direction for your next watch purchase, you can always reach out to me. If you want to contribute to the channel in some way, I've listed all the ways in the description. They're also in. I'm also here in the chat for your convenience. But more importantly, please hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't. We are here on a regular basis for quality watch content, for real watch talk. And again, thank you everyone for being here. And thank you so much, el profesor, el famoso profesor, for sharing this part of your morning with us, reporting from Europe. Guys, thank you so much. I'm bidding you adieu from Los Angeles. I will see you soon again with another important guest assessing the horological world one live stream at a time. Take care, everyone. Love you all.